There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It's the silence after another conversation that left you heavy again. The silence after a dinner that should have brought comfort, but instead brought tension. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like rest. It feels like retreat. And yet, you stay. You keep showing up. Because they're family. Because you've known them for years. Because loyalty, right? But what if that loyalty has quietly become your prison? We don't talk about this enough. The guilt. The invisible weight of staying in relationships that no longer feel safe, no longer feel supportive, but are still labeled as unbreakable just because of blood or history or habit. No one tells you how hard it is to outgrow someone you once loved deeply. No one tells you how lonely it feels to realize the people who once held you up are now holding you back. And even if the wounds aren't obvious, no shouting, no betrayal, there's a different kind of erosion. The kind that wears you down slowly, day after day, until one day, you don't recognize who you are around them anymore. We say things like, maybe I'm the problem. It's not that bad. They've been there since day one. But since when is day one a reason to ignore day now? The truth is, holding on can be harder than letting go. Not because you don't care, but because you've cared so long, you forgot how to choose yourself. Here's something you might need to hear today. Letting go doesn't mean you don't love them. It means you finally love yourself enough to stop shrinking. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Not in anger, but in grace. Not because they're bad, but because you've outgrown the version of yourself that kept you small just to keep them close. It's not easy, but growth never is. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we said it out loud. Sometimes, the hardest part of a relationship isn't the shouting. It's the silence that comes after. That long, slow erosion where the words fade, but the weight doesn't. You find yourself walking on eggshells, not because someone told you to, but because somehow it's just easier than facing the tension in the room. They didn't scream. They didn't cheat. They didn't disappear. But they also didn't ask how you really are. They didn't notice when you stopped smiling. They didn't stay when your soul started dimming. And so, you stay. Because there's no proof anything is wrong. Because leaving would seem dramatic. Because it's not that bad. But here's the thing about not that bad. It keeps you in places where you no longer feel alive, but you're too numb to leave. You might have told yourself, this is just what relationships look like after a while. Or, everyone grows apart sometimes, but deep down, you know something's off. Not just in them, in you. You've started second-guessing your feelings. You play therapist in your own mind. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm expecting too much. You're not. You're just starving for emotional oxygen in a space that used to feel like home. It's a strange kind of loneliness, to sit next to someone and still feel completely unseen, to share a bed, a meal, a life, but not a presence. The silence isn't peace. It's distance. It's the absence of care dressed up as calm. And here's the truth most people won't say out loud. Sometimes the quiet is where relationships die. Not with drama, not with fire, but with a slow, invisible fading. One conversation skipped, one emotion swallowed, one truth left unsaid at a time. Until one day you're just two people sharing a routine, not a connection. And maybe you've convinced yourself, at least they're not hurting me. But are they helping you grow? Are they seeing who you've become, or just who you used to be? You're not meant to shrink just to keep the peace. You're not meant to disappear just to avoid disruption. You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to feel the ache of absence, even if someone's still physically present. And no, you're not too much. You're just waking up to how little you've been met. So here's the beginning of the shift. Start listening to the silence, not to escape it, but to understand what it's been trying to tell you. Because silence, when held long enough, becomes a mirror. And if what you see there no longer reflects the person you're becoming, it's okay to walk toward a new kind of conversation. The one where you finally choose truth over comfort. The one where you stop convincing yourself to stay silent just because no one else is brave enough to speak. Letting go isn't something you do all at once. It's a quiet process. It begins in the gut, a discomfort you try to ignore. Then it moves to your chest, a tightness that doesn't go away. And finally, it reaches your eyes, when you start seeing things clearly for the first time. Not in anger, not in resentment, but in clarity. You realize this isn't the relationship you thought it was. Maybe it never was. Maybe the connection was built on who you used to be, not who you've become. Maybe it worked back when you didn't know what peace felt like. Back when you confused chaos with passion, silence with stability, loyalty with love. You start seeing the small moments that used to feel normal, but now feel like tiny betrayals to your growth. The backhanded compliments, the way they laugh when you share something vulnerable, the jokes that leave you shrinking inside, and you don't hate them. That's the hardest part. You don't walk away because they're evil. You walk away because you're evolving, because the cost of staying is your self-worth, and you finally realize it's too high. There's no perfect day to leave, no clear sign from the sky. Just a moment when you look in the mirror and ask, "Is this the life I'm still choosing?" And you hear a whisper back, "No, not this version. Not anymore." Letting go doesn't mean burning bridges. It doesn't mean you never cared. It means you've outgrown the version of yourself that tolerated emotional starvation just to keep the peace. You can love someone and still choose distance. You can honor the good without denying the harm. You can say thank you for the memories and no more for the present. This is where courage begins, not in confrontation, but in the soft decision to choose yourself. Some people won't understand. They'll call it selfish. They'll say, "But you've been friends for years." Or, "But they're your family." But the length of a relationship doesn't determine its worth. And blood doesn't guarantee safety. What matters is the energy exchanged. How you feel when you leave the room after being with them. Do you feel lighter? Or do you feel like you're carrying something that's not yours? That question matters more than their title in your life. We're taught to endure, to stick it out, to sacrifice for the sake of love. But love without respect isn't love. Support that demands silence isn't support. Connection that requires shrinking isn't connection. It's control with a softer face. So here's the truth you need to carry into your next chapter. You don't need a villain to justify leaving. You don't need to hit rock bottom. You just need to know, with quiet certainty, that your peace is worth protecting. And when you finally make that decision, it won't feel like a victory. Not at first. It might feel empty. It might feel wrong. It might feel like you're betraying something sacred. But over time, when the noise fades and the silence starts to feel like a friend again, you'll know. You didn't lose them. You found you. And that is the kind of letting go that changes everything. There's a moment, after the letting go, when everything goes quiet. Not the kind of silence that hurts. Not the silence of someone ignoring your needs, but a different kind. The kind that feels honest. And in that quiet, something stirs. Not noise, not regret, but a question. Who am I when I'm not bending for someone else? For so long, your identity was woven into keeping the peace, into making sure they were okay, into adjusting your energy to match the room. But now, the room is yours, and that can feel terrifying. Because when you've spent years measuring your worth by how little space you take up, taking up space again feels wrong, almost selfish. But it's not. It's sacred. Autonomy isn't loud. It doesn't look like rebellion or defiance. It looks like simple decisions made without fear. It sounds like your own voice, unfiltered, undecorated, unafraid. This is the work. Waking up and realizing you get to choose now. Who you speak to, what energy you allow, what time you give, and what you protect. No permission needed, no apology required. You don't owe anyone access to you, especially not those who drained you when they had it. And maybe this is where it begins. The reintroduction to your own needs, to preferences that used to get silenced, to boundaries that used to be optional. You're not cold for not answering every call. You're not distant for saying no. You're not rude for not playing small anymore. You're rebuilding. And some people won't like this version of you. The one who asks better questions. The one who pauses before saying yes. The one who stops explaining their healing to those committed to misunderstanding it. Let them go. Because the you who's emerging now doesn't live on borrowed worth. They know their value even when no one's clapping. That's the shift. You stop chasing validation from people who never saw you clearly. You start holding yourself like someone worth protecting. You become the safe space you used to beg others for. And this doesn't mean you never compromise. It means you stop compromising your core, your values, your voice, your self-trust. Autonomy isn't isolation, it's alignment. It's the quiet power of choosing what fits your soul without waiting for approval. And once you taste that, even in small ways, there's no going back. You start designing your days. You take your time walking through the world. You move slower, not because you're lost, but because you're no longer rushing to please. You start asking, is this mine to carry? Is this choice rooted in truth or in fear? You begin to understand that peace isn't passive. It's a deliberate path, one that demands attention, one that asks you to stay awake to yourself. This is the rebirth, not dramatic, not grand, just real. You're not becoming someone new. You're returning to who you were before the world told you to be smaller. And that person, with clear eyes and steady breath, isn't here to perform. They're here to live. When you've been conditioned to be agreeable, setting boundaries feels like betrayal. You say no, and guilt floods in. You take space, and they ask what's wrong. You speak your need, and suddenly you're difficult. But the truth is, you're not being unkind. You're being clear. And clarity scares people who benefited from your confusion. For a long time, you learned that love means flexibility, that being a good person means being available, that understanding means endless tolerance. But what if love also means limits? What if kindness has edges? What if saying this is enough is the most loving thing you'll ever do for yourself and for them? Boundaries are not about keeping people out. They're about keeping yourself in, keeping your energy from being drained by chaos, keeping your values from being bent by pressure, keeping your peace from being shattered by someone else's urgency. Here's a quiet truth. The more grounded you become, the more certain people will call you cold, because your new stillness no longer feeds their storms. They might push back, they might guilt trip you, they might say you've changed, and you have. That's the point. You're no longer explaining your worth. You're no longer justifying your exhaustion. You're no longer staying silent just to keep the connection. You're speaking in full sentences now. You're honoring your inner signals. You're protecting the version of you that once allowed too much just to be liked. And no, this isn't a wall. It's a door with a lock. You decide who gets the key. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're sacred. They say, I love you, but I love me too. Because when you say yes to everything, you slowly say no to yourself. And when you've abandoned yourself long enough, even small boundaries feel revolutionary. You start to realize that not every call needs to be answered. Not every emotion needs to be absorbed. Not every crisis belongs to you. You are not a sponge. You are not a therapist. You are not a rescue boat. You are a human being with limits. And limits are human. Limits are healthy. Limits are how we stay whole. So ask yourself, where have you been bending too far? What part of you keeps saying yes when everything in your chest says no? Reclaim that space, redraw that line, reteach the world how to treat you, not by force, but by consistency. And here's something to remember when the guilt creeps in. You're not punishing them. You're preserving you. Because peace isn't just found in quiet rooms and long walks. It's found in the sentence, I don't accept that anymore. And when you start to speak that sentence, the world changes. Not all at once, but in small seismic shifts, in the way people approach you, in the energy you attract, in the respect you begin to embody without saying a word. That's the power of a boundary set in love, not fear. Not to exile, but to protect. Not to reject, but to realign. Because the right people won't see your boundaries as rejection. They'll see them as an invitation to meet you at the level of self-respect you've claimed. And the ones who walk away, they were never meant to walk that far with you anyway. Once you've walked away from what drains you, once you've drawn the lines that keep you grounded, you're left with space. And that space is sacred. It can feel lonely at first, quiet, even unfamiliar, because for a long time, your life may have been filled with noise, conversations that led nowhere, connections that asked for your energy but not your truth. Now, with room to breathe, you get to ask a different question. Who do I want to walk beside me from here? Not out of habit, not out of guilt, but from clarity. This is your chance to rebuild your circle, not with people who simply tolerate you, but with those who truly see you. Not with those who only show up when you're small, but those who stay present as you grow. You start to notice things. The way someone listens without trying to fix you. The way someone celebrates you without competition. The way someone respects your no without needing an explanation. These aren't small things. They're signals. Proof that emotional maturity exists. Proof that real connection doesn't come from proximity, but from shared presence. And maybe you begin to understand something no one taught you before. That depth matters more than duration. That history is not loyalty. That time spent means nothing if love never grew. So you become intentional. You no longer chase. You no longer audition. You no longer offer discounts on your boundaries just to belong. Instead, you let energy speak. You let alignment guide you. You start choosing people who speak with their actions, not just their apologies. Who show up when it's inconvenient, not just when it's easy. Who make you feel safe, not just seen. And in return, you offer the same. Because now you know, true connection is mutual. It's not a performance. It's a presence. You begin building a different kind of community, one that feels like breath, not pressure. Conversations that leave you lighter. Exchanges where you don't have to shrink to be loved. Spaces where your truth is not just allowed, it's invited. These aren't perfect people, but they are aware. They're doing the work too, and that's what matters. Because when two people are both grounded in self-awareness, there's room for real growth. There's space to get it wrong, to apologize, to try again, without shame, without games. This is the new compass. Does this connection bring me closer to peace or further from it? And if the answer isn't peace, you adjust. Not from bitterness, not from fear, but from alignment. You become someone who protects what you've healed, who honors what you've rebuilt, who treats your inner life with the respect it deserves and expects the same in return. That's not ego. That's integrity. And in that integrity, you begin to experience relationships in a new way, as mirrors, not masks, as sacred exchanges, not obligations, as shared soil, not shaky ground. The people who walk with you now, they won't always say the right things. They won't always meet every need, but they'll grow beside you. They'll hold space, not hold power. They'll challenge you, not control you. They'll reflect your light, not dim it to shine theirs. And when that happens, when you realize you've built a circle not just of company but of clarity, you'll know. You didn't just leave something behind. You moved towards something real. And you're not walking alone anymore. You've walked with me through the silence, through the unraveling of what once felt safe, through the courage of saying goodbye and the slow return to your own voice. We've talked about boundaries, about healing without hatred, about choosing people not by history but by harmony. And maybe, through it all, you've started to feel what it means to protect your peace without apology. Not with walls, but with wisdom. Not with fire, but with clarity. Because this journey, it isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before you forgot your worth, before you settled, before you stayed too long, before you mistook endurance for love. So now the question is yours. Who in your life feels like peace, and who feels like survival? That answer matters more than you think. And if this conversation stirred something in you, if it helped you name what's been quietly aching, stay with us. There's more to unpack, more truth to name, more freedom to claim. You can subscribe, not because it's what people say, but because your next clarity might be one conversation away. And as we part, carry this with you. No one is truly free who isn't master of themselves. Epictetus. May your boundaries be soft but strong. May your circle be small but sacred. And may your life reflect the peace you fought so hard to earn. Until next time, walk slow, walk true, and don't forget, you're allowed to choose again.